Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Knowledge and Learning Commons, or the Commons as we call it. My name is Natalie. I work here at the UN Library and Archives in Geneva, and it's a great pleasure to have you back with us at the Commons. We've recently gone hybrid, just a month ago, and so it's so wonderful to see some of you here in person, but actually the majority of you are still joining us online. More than 200 of you are registered to come and join us from different places, so a big welcome to you all. If you're new to the Commons, I see a few new faces. The Commons is our space for informal learning, but also knowledge sharing on issues of both multilateralism and professional development. And our main aim at the Commons is to be able to provide this space to UN staff, diplomats, and interns across UN Geneva, but also globally now that we're online, to be able to talk about the issues that matter to how we work at the UN. At the Commons over the past few years, we've been actually quite interested in the evolution of work and the future of work. And today we wanted to touch upon leadership, but in particular, mindful leadership. Before we get there, we have just a few housekeeping notes to mention to you. If you're joining us online, which we know is the majority of you, our platform today is WebEx. We've prepared a brief video to show you just a few accessibility features and also to help you navigate the platform. So let's take a look.
Welcome to a Knowledge and Learning Commons online event. Here are a few accessibility features available on WebEx webinar to ensure you have the best experience with us today. At the bottom of your screen there is a menu bar with various settings. Click on the Robotic CC, WebEx Assistance, icon to enable closed captioning, and this open a tab on the right-hand side of your screen. This will allow you to get written transcription with full meeting, complete with clearly labeled speakers. Or you can select the second option in the menu bar, Closed Captioning, which will appear at the bottom of your screen, allowing you to easily follow along in the meeting with real-time captioning. WebEx allows you to receive live translation to multiple languages by clicking on the bottom arrow. If you would like to interact with us live, then raise your hand by navigating to the menu bar at the bottom of your screen and selecting the seventh option from the left side of the menu. Customize your own view to watch the event in your preference through selecting Layout at the top right side of your screen and customizing your video layouts to best suit your needs. For any further assistance or questions throughout the event, then chat with us directly by selecting the chat icon, second option from the right side of the menu bar. Keep an eye out on the chat for announcements from our team. WebEx is compatible with all screen readers and default keyboard shortcuts. Our team behind the scenes are here to answer you directly. Enjoy the event.
We hope that was helpful for you joining us online. If you do have any questions via WebEx, please reach out to us using the chat. Our team behind the scenes will assist. If you're here in the room, you can simply raise your hand and our team also here will be able to help you, hopefully with your question. So let's get started. Today we're talking about leadership. What does it mean for us today? Over the past few years, actually maybe the past decade or so, we've seen a lot of change in how we view leadership, and traditional kind of perhaps more stereotypical models of leadership are being questioned. It is also exciting to see that we're also talking about gender and what that means for leadership and how we can be more diverse and inclusive when we look at what a leader means. Today we wanted to really touch upon mindful leadership, and can this make a difference in how we can reach our full potential as leaders, no matter whether we're directors or perhaps leaders of teams or maybe even just projects that are short term. And so we have a few learning objectives we wanted to cover with you today. You'll see those now on the screen. We're going to look at, for those perhaps who are new to mindfulness, the basics of mindfulness and how it can support wholesome leadership at all levels. We'll also explore the benefits of mindful leadership for both for leaders but also teams and organizations, and how it can support our growth and development mentally. We'll also hopefully have time to discuss practical ways that we can harness mindfulness to lead based on our values and ethics, and for us at the UN, of course, according to also UN values, and also practice a guided developmental mindfulness technique together. We've been looking at mindfulness for the past few years, so this is also a new practice for us to look at it in terms of our development and our growth. So it's a pleasure to introduce you now to our speakers who are joining us to answer these important questions for us. Joining us all the way from Sydney, where it's already the evening, we have with us Michael Bunting. He's the author of the best-selling book, The Mindful Leader. We have this actually at the library, so if you'd like to read it after the session, we have it and it's accessible for you. You can come see us after the session. He's been working for more than 20 years as a global expert on transformational leadership development, mindfulness, adult development and culture change, and also many other topics. We also have with us our regular at the Commons, Mary Bridget Leahy. She's our staff counsellor at UN Geneva. A big thank you, Michael and Mary, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. We also have time for questions with you. We actually would love your opinions. So we're using Mentimeter today to submit your questions. You can go to menti.com. You'll see on the screen a QR code to join us. And then you'll also see the code to join. So if you use your QR code using your phone, it will automatically come to the39 page. If you're joining us maybe via your desktop, it's menti.com, and the code is 5293383983. Sorry. So the code is 52933983. We'll put that in the chat if you're joining us via WebEx as well. So please do ask your questions. If you're in the room, there's time to also raise your hand, and we'll provide you a microphone. In addition to you asking questions, we do have a few questions for you based on perhaps what you think leadership is or what you'd like to see in leaders. And we do have a warm-up actually that we'd like to ask you right now. And that question is, what do you value in a leader today? We've already got a few answers there, so perhaps you have a word for us. You can also submit more than one word. So we'll give you time to join. If you're just joining us now, this is Menti. You can go to menti.com and join us there. Great. So while we're waiting for a few more answers to come, I wanted to actually ask Mary to maybe kick us off, maybe with a few words. In a few words, what do you value in a leader today?
Thank you, Natalie. For me, I think it would be knowledge, someone that I can learn from that will help me guide my career and my development, a role model.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mary. We see quite a few words coming up on the screen now. So those that are the biggest are the ones that are being answered the most. So empathy, understanding are the two biggest words we see on the screen. But I also see here flexibility, trust, honesty, support, being human, knowledge sharing, integrity, a lot of different words coming up here. So empathy actually is now our biggest word, understanding as well. Thanks a lot to you all who have submitted those words. Maybe I pass to Michael now. Perhaps you'd like to comment on some of those words coming up in what we value in a leader today. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you. What do we value in it? Well, it's a big answer. We could spend the rest of the hour talking about just this question. We've researched this subject extensively, and our first book I wrote was with Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, who've got something like 5 million people researched on the subject. What do we value in a leader? And it's very simple. The first thing we value is an honest leader that walks the talk, and that's the integrity piece. So they do what they'll say they're going to do, and there's a degree of trust. The second is we want them to provide us with a vision of somewhere where we can go, that we want them to take accountability for their own behavior and not blame everyone else for the state of affairs. So to own it, take it. But we also, interestingly enough, want them to hold others to account. Because when we work in teams and organizations where, for example, bad behavior is not addressed, it's very demoralizing. Or if some people are just not doing the work, their share of the work, and it's not addressed, it's demoralizing. So interestingly, accountability seems like a tough thing, but it's a very important thing for leadership. We want them to be open-minded and create growth and learning environments so we can grow and learn and flourish. We want to be empowered, so we want to be given choice on how. We may not choose the what sometimes, but we definitely want to choose the how so that we can stumble and learn and grow and create our own paths. And we want to be empathized with, appreciated, cared for, encouraged. This whole field of, what I just call it love, basically. We need love. We need leaders to have love. I've never, in my I think it's now 22 years in this field, I've never met someone I regarded as a fantastic leader who didn't have a genuinely open heart and love for the people that they led. And who wants to be led by someone anyway that doesn't have a genuine sense of care and love for you, right? And yet sometimes that care and love will be, they might have a tough conversation with you because it's what you need, and it's from care and love. That's the paradox of great leadership.
Yeah, some great thoughts to open us up now. So maybe let's get started looking at mindfulness, but also why this matters to leadership. So in your book, Michael, you actually say that leadership is one of the most challenging endeavors we can undertake. So what do you think are some of maybe the biggest challenges, in a few words, for leaders or leadership today?
I think when I wrote that, what we were implying is that what we've noticed with great leaders is they feel it as a heavy burden. They don't see it so much as a right or an entitlement. They see it as a burden of service. It's like trying to be a great parent. It's a similar kind of thing. It's a wonderful thing, but it's a heavy duty to take on. And the best leaders see it that way. The worst leaders we see take it as a viewpoint that, I can just tell people what to do, et cetera, because I'm the boss. That's not what we mean. So we mean good leadership. And then nowadays, the challenge, of course, is that most leaders we've worked with suffer from huge amount of imposter syndrome. So we've just finished writing a new book, and we interviewed 26 leaders in various global positions in large organizations. And they all admitted to us that they have a deep sense of imposter syndrome. Like someone's going to find out they don't know what they're doing half the time. And because the world is so complex now and so fast, that the average leader, a senior leader particularly, really doesn't know what they're doing half the time. Most of it's guesswork, but we live in a world where people are desperate for certainty in the uncertainty. And so often the leaders get seduced by the idea, particularly political leaders. They get seduced by the idea of promising simplicity and certainty in a world that's full of complexity and gray. And so what we find leaders need to do more and more and more is promise to be a great learner, not to be a great knower. And this is one thing that Jim and Barry, my co-authors of my first book, said, the best leaders are the best learners. But to be constantly learning is exhausting at some level. So that's a broad base. And then the other thing we're seeing now, at least my work is mostly focused in the corporate arena, is that there's such a desperate dissonance between corporations' stated values and the actual behaviors that we see in corporations. And it's not just the breaches of ethics, it's the gossiping, the conversations after the conversations, the not doing what they say they will do, the withholding of honest feedback to people because we want approval and so forth. So we've now begun to understand that to be a great leader, you also have to be incredibly internally mature. You have to be able to withstand not being liked while you do the right thing. So there's this deep need for sort of an ethical values compass within, and that's very challenging to do from a growth perspective.
Yeah, we'll touch a bit more later on the idea of growth and development, because this is a super interesting part that we haven't covered yet at the Commons in terms of mindfulness. But before we move forward, we have maybe different understandings of what mindfulness is. So I wanted to ask both you, Michael, and also you, Mary, maybe let's start with what is mindfulness, and then we'll connect that to how this integrates into leadership. So Mary, maybe we start with you now, because you've been leading some mindfulness sessions at the Commons for the past 2 years, especially during the pandemic. In maybe a brief sentence or two, what does mindfulness mean in your practice?
Thank you, Natalie. I would say mindfulness is being in the present moment, not thinking about the future or worrying about the past. And I would say it's allowing yourself to pause. So before we speak and say something that might say hurt someone's feelings or that we take an action, pause and reflect and think.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mary. Michael, perhaps you'd like to reflect on that and also share what does mindfulness mean in your practice?
Yeah, what Mary said, I'll add a bit more. The process of mindfulness, the original word mindfulness comes from a Pali word called sati, which means remembering. So the original word means to remember where you are and sort of see, like remember and recollect, reconnect. And then mindfulness itself, exactly as Mary said, it's a process of being present. And then the quality of the presence is not just necessarily concentrated attention. It's also got an emotional quality of open-heartedness or friendliness to it. So when I'm being mindful, there's a quality of warmth and kindness in the attention. There's an embracingness in the attention. And then mindfulness is directed inwards and outwards. So I can be mindful of, just the pure act of listening to someone is a process of mindfulness. Mindfulness is completely natural to every human being. I mean, you couldn't walk across the room without mindfulness. It's not some strange thing. It's totally natural. And then you can also use mindfulness to look within. So one can see one's thoughts or emotions. And it's the way, sometimes an analogy we'll use is, it's the vast majority of people, we ask the question, how do you be self-aware? Or let's practice self-awareness. They can't answer it. They don't know how to be self-aware. And mindfulness is a process of cultivating an awareness that you can also direct internally. So you can notice the physical, emotional, and mental experience. And that's the process of self-awareing. But it's this warm, kind, balanced attention within. So it's a training. In some ways, mindfulness has got two elements. It's got the training of attention, and then it's got the education of where to place your attention. It's got these two qualities to it.
Okay.
And now one last thing I can add is that, a lot of people think mindfulness is meditation, which is not true. Exactly as Mary put it, it's a process of presencing. And by the way, it can be incredibly hard. We think, oh, that sounds easy and simple. It's not easy and simple. For example, if you're getting critical feedback from someone, they're challenging you or criticizing you, it's incredibly difficult to stay present in that and aware. Or if you're feeling sad or anxious or hurt, it's incredibly difficult to stay present with those kinds of feelings. So it's simple and beautiful, but it's also it's a very deep subject, and it has a lot of richness to it. And in terms of meditation, mindfulness is the process of presencing. Meditation is like exercise. If you think about exercise as a general topic, you could say walking to work would be exercise, taking the flight of stairs, walking around the block, just general being physically active is exercise. And then you go to the gym and you really get intense exercise. You develop particular muscles and things. Meditation is the equivalent of gym for mindfulness. It's like how we intensely develop mindfulness for its own sake. Like you go to the gym for exercise for its own sake, which then benefits the rest of your fitness and life. That's an analogy of what meditation is to mindfulness. And then one last thing, sorry, Natalie, I know this is a passion. There are different kinds of meditations. So there are meditations that are mindfulness meditations, and there are meditations that are not mindfulness meditations. For example, thinking about a beautiful, if you dream up in your mind, okay, you're sitting at a quiet lake and you're imagining peacefulness, and that is not mindfulness. That's not a mindfulness meditation. It can be beneficial, it's just not mindfulness. Because mindfulness has got this commitment to being present with what's happening now, not what you're creating or imagining in your mind.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Michael. If anyone has any questions, perhaps you're welcome to share them on menti.com, and we'll cover them after the conversation today. Maybe then if we move on from there, Michael, when we think about what you've just mentioned about being present, we often think about the benefits of mindfulness being maybe focus or increased calm, which is, of course, already very positive. But in your book, you also link this to leadership and how it can help us grow and develop. So maybe could you go into a bit more detail here, and maybe if there's an example you'd like to share about how we actually do this in practice?
I will start with a statistic. Having just researched this for our new book, just gives you a sense that most of us are prisoners to repeated behavior and thoughts, and we're not even aware of it. There was a recent research study done on the mind, and the conclusion, it was a very comprehensive study, and the conclusion was we think between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of our thinking induces anxiety and fear, so it's negatively oriented. And 95% of our thinking is repetition. So you can get a sense that there's very little space there for something new and all that repetition and negativity of the mind. And you may think to yourself as you're hearing this, well, that's not me. But if that's not you, you're probably not a human being. This is the sort of the default. It's that what happens is we become numb and we don't even notice we're doing it anymore. And so that's the primary, one of the primary goals of mindfulness is not just to create more space and balance, is to create the space and balance within which to explore what's really going on in yourself. And so I'll give you a really neat example of how this can serve as a developmental. I can even name the person. This is Stephen, he's in our new book, Stephen Barrett, who was the global head of HR for Novartis Pharmaceuticals, which is a Fortune 50 organization. And Stephen made this statement that he prided himself on never being driven by emotions his whole career. He felt, always very rational. When he began studying and practicing mindfulness, one of the processes, particularly of developmental mindfulness, is to introduce ourselves into our emotional world again, and to begin to feel and explore our emotional world, not bypass it, not ignore it, not just concentrate through it. It's to befriend it and understand it. And as a result, Stephen discovered that he found almost every single one of his poor decisions and poor actions was in fact driven by emotions. And I asked him for an example, and he gave a really simple one, which was that when he needed to address something in someone, when he saw someone behaving not ideally or underperforming, or needed to give people tough feedback, he avoided it. And then he told himself these amazingly interesting stories of like, it's not the right time, don't worry, they'll come around. And that felt very rational to him. But at the bottom line, the main reason he was choosing not to speak to people was that he was afraid of the emotional pain that he would need to face and work with in telling them the truth. And so we find very quickly when we get to the developmental mindfulness practices, there's this emphasis on developing the ability to know our emotions, to feel our emotions, whether they're bad's not the right word, whether they're comfortable, uncomfortable, pleasant or unpleasant, and then the ability to stay true to a North Star compass like our values and ethics despite the discomfort. The challenge is that without the ability to know how to work with emotions skillfully, we invariably opt for numbing options. And numbing options are turning your phone on, social media. They are ignoring the conversation and telling yourself stories, I'll get to it later. We're constantly trying to dampen our feelings down with various mechanisms so that we don't feel the pain or dissonance of not living our values. And this is the tremendous tragedy, I think, in leadership around the world. And it enables leaders at a political level and at a corporate level to behave in ways that are inhuman, that are so cruel, or just broadly poor leadership, because what's happened is they've completely disconnected from their emotional world, and they're now operating from greed or fear and a kind of stuck, caught pattern. And mindfulness is scary to those people, because what mindfulness does is it reintroduces you to what's really going on inside yourself. And if you're operating from an unethical place, or you're operating from a closed-hearted, unempathetic, cruel place, you begin to see that it's a lot of pain in the body and mind, a lot of pain. And that in seeing that pain, it's hard to ignore. And then there's an invitation to grow with it and work with it. But again, we would say, as Carl Jung put it, he said it's not a very pleasant process. So it's not many people who want to do it, which is why, unfortunately, we find so few exceptional leaders.
I guess any aspect of change or growth is not always pleasant.
Generally it's not pleasant. And I suppose maybe I just give it, I love simplicity. And so let me try and explain, because I know I'm explaining things in a complex way at the moment. Let me just explain this in really key, simple ways. One of the key things we invite leaders to look at is we ask the question, do leaders need to walk the talk? And everybody, and hopefully those of you in your audience would nod and agree, yes, of course, leaders need to walk the talk. The second question we ask is, so what's the talk you try and walk? Now, very few leaders, less than 1% of leaders we meet can answer that question, which is shocking and astonishing. Still to this day, it's you say leaders should walk the talk, but you don't have a talk. You're a leader and you don't have a conscious talk. Well, then how do you walk the talk? So that's a beginning of what we call mindfulness, is like a consciousness, an awareness, and a deliberateness of how I'm showing up in my life, right? What we then begin to see is that what's going on when we don't follow our ethics and our values. For example, you guys all said empathy is really important. What's going on when we're not empathetic when we should be? Like, what's happening there? And when we look at mindfulness, particularly the second foundation, there's 4 foundations of mindfulness. What that means is there's 4 areas with which you need to look at in a quite sophisticated mindfulness practice. And I should just qualify, if everybody's wondering what that's all about, is that we are going to give you an access code to an app that we've built that has all the 4 foundations. You can introduce them, you can learn about them. There's podcast series on them, and there's practices. It's all there for you. But let me just give you a sense of the second foundation. The second foundation of mindfulness begins where we explore our relationship with what's going on in our lives and inside us. And the broad way of looking at this is there's three kinds of experiences. There's pleasant or nice experiences in our life, nice emotions, nice thoughts, nice people. And then there's unpleasant or challenging or painful situations or circumstances in our life. That could be, difficult people. There could be excessive cold or heat or, a meeting that's going on too long. It could be physical pain. So there's a whole category of unpleasant. And then there's a third category, which is neutral. And neutral is when we're not sure if it's pleasant or unpleasant, and it's got this indistinct feeling. And the easiest example I usually use is brushing your teeth in the morning. Most of us don't wake up in the morning, and when we go brush our teeth, we go, "Oh yes, I love brushing my teeth." Nor do we go, "Oh gosh, I have to brush my teeth." We just kind of do it. It's like a neutral thing. We're habituated to it. What happens in the mind is that when things are pleasant or nice, the mind's, you could use brain science here. It's called a fast pathway in the brain. The brain's default response to pleasant feelings is to hold on. It's to chase them and hold on. And it's called greed and clinging in mindfulness practice. So the principal relationship we have with things that are nice, we either hold on to them or we greed for them, we long for them. Equally, when things are unpleasant, we have a resistance to them. So we have fear or avoidance or even hatred. I don't like this. I don't want this experience. So we have fear and hatred. And then when experiences are neutral, the mind tends to drift. It's like it's indistinct and numb. When we ask a leader, what's going on when you're not walking your talk, you will find very quickly that it's one of those, what we ought to call the three poisons in mindfulness practice. It's greed and clinging, or it's fear, resistance, or hate, or it's numbing. And constantly we're in a dance with these three poisons through our lives. What's shocking, when I said to you guys that 95% of your thinking is repetition, what that's telling you is that, there's a massive amount of numbness. The fact that that's news to most people, oh, wow, 95% repetition. We would often ask, how could you not know that? It's your mind. How could you not know what's going on in your mind? And that's the problem with not being mindful. And so when we see how mindfulness intersects with being ethical and values-based, we begin to know and understand and calibrate when I'm not walking my talk, not following my ethics, I'm caught in greed, clinging, or hate and resisting or fearing, or I'm caught in numb habituation. And this beautiful consciousness allows us to notice those qualities and come back into the present with a friendly, warm heart, which then cuts through the greed, fear, and clinging, and then allows us to back and realign with our walk the talk. It kind of opens the heart, and then when there's a need for empathy, and we don't back away from empathy. So, for example, empathizing with people in tremendous pain is extremely painful for the person empathizing. The heart hurts. When we see someone in pain and we really feel with them and empathize with them, we become in pain. And being able to tolerate and bear pain, emotional pain, is extremely important for maturity and growth. Because if we can't handle it, we either turn away from the person or we try and fix them. And we send them, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And we say these crazy, inane, silly things to people like, don't be afraid. And they're like, oh, great, thank you very much. Now that you've told me not to be afraid, I'm not afraid. They don't work. Empathy is a process of deeply connecting, feeling, breathing with another person, knowing them, knowing their pain, knowing their difficulties. And from that connection and trust and them feeling not alone, then there's the possibility of, fresh actions or new actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael. And for everyone joining us, we will be practicing a 5-minute mindfulness practice together to help us kind of, be inspired by this and to perhaps integrate it into our daily lives. Before we get there, we just have one more question we wanted to ask you in our audience so we can cover also what this means for teams and organizations if we have mindful leaders. And so the question will be on Mentimeter. If you're already joining us using your phone, normally you should still have the landing page for that. And our question actually is a scale, a poll. You can choose more than one option. And we wanted to ask you, what impacts your engagement at work? Perhaps it's more than one of these 4 things, and that's totally fine. We just have 4 today as an example. Is it the team environment, the behavior of my managers and leaders, the salary and the benefits, or the type of work I do? So we'll leave you just a moment to answer that for us, to think about that and answer that. And we'll just cover it briefly before we get into the live mindfulness practice. So more than one is actually, well, definitely we have the team environment, the highest at the moment, but also now in line with the behavior of my managers and my leaders. The type of work I do is also super important to people. The salary and the benefits actually not coming in first at all. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. Feel free to keep answering if you're just joining us now. So in top place, we have both the team environment and the behavior of my managers and leaders. Michael, can I pass back to you just really briefly? Can you maybe reflect on this a bit? Because I do know in your book that you talk about the behavior of leaders being the most statistically important thing for the engagement of a team. And people.
Yes, and that data makes perfect sense. I love those answers because the team environment is ironically primarily determined by the leader. So in other words, what the leader tolerates or doesn't tolerate, encourages and not encourages, ultimately has a significant impact on the team environment. And then, of course, there's the leader's direct behavior. So I'm totally not surprised. They are completely connected, those two subjects. Our research tells us, and we've got a 360 assessment, and then we've researched people's. The two key pieces of data that we found fascinating are that 40% of a person's engagement, according to our research, can be explained by their boss's behavior. That's way and above anything else that people would report. And then, interestingly enough, 33% of a person's mental health can be explained by their boss's behavior, which is one of the passions we have, is to try and put mental health programs into an organization that doesn't address leadership behavior is truly crazy, because leaders have such a huge impact on the people they lead. And we have a joke with leaders sometimes when we show them that statistic, that if you don't care about the way you lead and its impact on people's mental health, you probably shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get to the mindfulness, Mary, can I also ask you perhaps to comment on this? And I guess knowing that you are our staff counselor here at UN Geneva, where we have so much diversity and a multicultural kind of environment, anything you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Natalie and Michael. Yeah, I think like what Michael said, the leader has such a huge impact on the team, and it's really important to think about, your own behavior and how you come across every day and how you influence others. I think at the UN, it's important to remember that a lot of people are working and writing in a language that's not their first language. Here in Geneva, it's French and English, obviously. So to be patient, to be kind, and then think of the positive things. So there might be someone in your team that's frustrating you by being slow, for example, but look at the good things. Always try to see the positive in people rather than the negative.
Yeah, a good reminder. Thank you. So to those just joining us now, also if you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in menti.com. We'll cover them very soon in Q&A time, or if those in the room, you can also raise your hand and we'll give you a mic. So maybe the moment we've all been waiting for. Michael, can we have a mindfulness practice with you?
Great. So we're going to do a meditation practice for 5 minutes now. And I'm going to play. This is directly from our app. And I'm going to play with it and just encourage you to find a relaxed position. Generally, it's encouraged to sit with a straight back because that's how babies naturally sit, with a straight back, and the body's at most at ease when you sit with a straight back. It's the best thing for your body, actually. And you're also welcome to stand as well if you really don't feel like sitting and do this practice. I'm going to press play. Settle into your meditation posture. Find a sense of inner balance. Let your eyes close. Soften and relax your shoulders. Take a deep breath and relax on the out-breath. Now notice that your body is breathing without your assistance. Let the breathing take care of itself. Just relax while you notice the body breathing. Notice that the in-breath and the out-breath are actually movements. Where do you find these movements to be clearest and most obvious? in the belly, the midriff, in the chest maybe, in the shoulders. Settle your awareness where these movements are clearest and most obvious. As you refine mindfulness of breathing, you become more sensitive to how your body and mind respond to life situations. And this will give you the space to make wise choices rather than react instinctively. So return to the movements of your breathing. Let's refine the details. These movements must be going somewhere. In which direction do they go? Are they vertical, moving up and down the body? Maybe horizontal. Do the movements go in curves? Do they create other shapes? Track the movement, the fine details of the movement. How long are the movements? Is your in-breath longer or shorter than your out-breath? Is your out-breath longer or shorter than your in-breath? Or are they of equal length? Focus on the detail of length. If the details are not distinct to you, just relax and rest your awareness on your breathing without trying to be precise. Don't force anything. Now let's look at clarity. Is the movement of the in-breath clearer or less clear than the movement of the out-breath? Is the movement of the out-breath clearer or less clear than the movement of the in-breath? Or are they both equally clear or equally obscure? Focus on clarity. If there are two movements, one for in-breath and one for out-breath, can you find the beginning of the in-breath? Can you find the beginning of the out-breath? Focus on beginnings. How about endings? See if you can notice the end of the out-breath and the end of the in-breath. Now let that all go and relax. Let the movements of your breath come to you. Prepare to end your session by reflecting on what just happened. Could you find the movements of your breathing? Could you focus on their refined details? Or did something get in the way? Don't judge your session as successful or unsuccessful. Just note what actually happened. This is mindfulness.
Give people a few minutes to open the eyes. How are we feeling in the audience in the room? So that was just a really brief mindfulness practice from what Michael has also been working on in terms of developmental techniques. We'll share some more resources after today's session on how you can also learn some more and also practice a bit more on your own. But now it's time to head to Q&A. So let's take a look. We've got some questions coming in via Menti. So maybe we begin with those of us joining online, if you have any questions there. We'll just wait for the questions to come up. Great. Okay, so let's begin with one question. Yeah, we didn't touch yet upon how extremely busy everybody is. So with our extremely busy agendas, how can one still dedicate and take time to practice meditation or mindfulness? How can we manage this? Michael, can I pass to you first?
The easiest answer is cut out your social media, and you'll be shocked at how much time you're spending on social media. But I think the first thing we had a conversation with a pharmaceutical client in the US today, and they were asking the same question, and we said the problem that happens is when you get busy, it's addictive, and you get into a part of your brain that just is on rinse and repeat, and you start losing your sense of connection with yourself. And you actually start losing joy, and you become progressively more numb. So it's remembering the why you're doing a practice, because what we always recommend to our clients is first ask yourself, what kind of life do I want to live? Like if it's in 10 years from now and I met you, do you want to be more stressed, more numb, more lost in social media, or do you want to be more awake, more present, more open? And then what you cultivate on a daily basis will determine which direction you go. And so it's just remembering to yourself, because it's hard to have a disciplined practice unless you really feel the importance of the why for you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the best time to practice meditation itself is either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day with a transition. So it's at the end of the workday when you turn the computer off, and now you're going to, for most of us nowadays, you're going to go into the next room in your home, or you're going to get in a car. It's allowing yourself to take 5 minutes and just sit still and practice. And you can use an app like we're going to give you, where you just listen to a guided meditation. Same with the morning. If you wake up in the morning, as one of my friends, meditation teachers, always said to me, you've got infinite time in the morning. Just get up earlier. It's a wonderful time to meditate waking up in the morning, a transition from work to home. And then also, it's not a bad idea. It's not developmental per se. You won't grow, but you will get better sleep as you meditate. Going to sleep is very powerful, because the mind, when you get into bed, the mind is usually not with your body. Your body's in the bed and your mind is somewhere else. What mindfulness is designed to do is bring the body and the mind together. So if your body's in bed, you want your mind to be in bed. It's sleeping time. And so meditation can be very useful there as well, to bring the two together.
Yeah. And so you mentioned maybe some good times to practice it. But before actually we started the event, you'd also mentioned to us in conversation with Mary that the importance of not seeing mindfulness as just that 5 minutes that you have at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. How can we integrate mindfulness into how we work, into how we live our lives?
Yeah. So I just wanted to empathize with everyone. If you listen to that 5-minute meditation, there's a good chance that there were periods of time where you're feeling stress in the meditation itself. When the instructions are like, feel where the breath is and how it's moving and the in and out, all these details. And it can, if you were really trying to get it right, you would find a tension in the body. What's interesting is developmental mindfulness is more challenging than the calming style of mindfulness. What that little meditation did is it pulled you into like the precision of awareing. That's the developmental style of mindfulness, noticing things with precision. And then it pulls you back into the general relaxing with the breathing. So just an FYI, if you were struggling, that's normal. And then you might have felt relieved when the instructions were, just relax and just feel the breathing. That's the difference, right? One's like at gym, and the other is like this calming. That noticing with precision what's going on in you, and you can get incredibly precise with noticing, is what we want to bring into our daily lives. So for example, in our work when we're presenting, we always say to my team, be extremely conscious of your intention when you're speaking. If there's any intention to shame or belittle or correct or make someone sorry they said something, you'll feel the intention in the body. The body will give away. The body always tells the truth. The mind very reliably lies. The mind's amazing, this extra cookie's not going to affect me. It doesn't matter if I watch another movie for an hour. I'll be okay in the morning. The mind just lies all the time. So it's like, listen to the body, and it's truth. It's got this amazing ability to tell the truth. And so the daily experience of practicing mindfulness is to learn what the body's telling you, what you're doing. So like, for example, when it's time to sleep, your body's telling you, are you listening? When you're being unkind, your body will tell you. There will be particular traces. When you're rationalizing and you're excusing yourself, your body will tell you. And what I mean by that is the body has trace kind of feelings in it that you begin to learn as signals. For example, when I'm not telling the truth, my body has this particular feeling about it. It's got this nervousy kind of like, it's like I lose connection with the chair I'm sitting on. It's got this weird, airy feeling in the body. And it's like, right, you're off beam. There's the signal. That's the best way to learn how to regulate what's called self-regulating awareness, is to regulate your body. And we say in a more poetic way, it's a means with which to live a regret-free life. Because it's only when we're disconnected from what's going on inside us that we begin to behave in ways that we later regret.
Yeah, that's great. And Mary, can I ask you as well, the question was with regard to we're so busy, how can we learn and practice mindfulness? You've also got a few things happening at the UN that perhaps you'd like to share.
Yes, thank you, Natalie and Michael. I think that was a really good tip from Michael, to think that the body tells us the truth. So to pay attention to our mind and our body. And actually, yes, we do work in collaboration with the Center for Learning and Multilingualism. And we have 2 more workshops coming up. There's a series of 3. We had one, Janana and I, last week. The next one is actually on the mind-body connection. And then the 3rd one will be on prevention of burnout and how to, like Michael says, how to look after ourselves. And I think it was a really good tip. Michael said, what do we think about, what do we want to be like in 10 years' time? Do we want to be still full of stress, or do we want to learn how to manage that? And the other thing that was important that Michael said was, the lies that we tell ourselves. I think that's really important. And speaking with purpose, like, are we going to offend anybody? Some people enjoy conflict, or well, they must, because they do it so often, but actually none of us want to have regrets or to be seen as a bad person. So, and I think then finding the time, for me, when I do it, when I practice something, it's because I know I will feel better afterwards. So say I will finish work on time twice a week to go and do a practice, and then I know I feel better that night and the next day.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Perhaps there's a question in the room if anyone has anything to ask Michael or Mary. We'll bring around microphones if anyone has a question.
While we're waiting for the question, I'd just like to add something to what Mary said, is that there's research that shows that for those of you who are listening to this who are parents, it's interesting research that shows that a large amount of children now are going through a kind of form of cold or cool trauma in their homes, where they're not getting enough connected attention from the parents. And that creates profound trauma, psychological trauma in children. And it's really quite tragic because you don't see it. It's not like verbal or physical or sexual abuse. It's this coolness in the home, and then the children experience this lack of enoughness inside themselves, and then they compensate with various things. And the term that's used is proximate abandonment. So the children are experiencing abandonment while the parents are proximate to them, right near them, because everyone's on a screen, and then the parents are exhausted and they haven't nourished themselves to be present, and presence being hard. And if the child, which invariably they do, they play up a bit because they're desperate for attention, and then that creates irritation, and you get the cycle of numbing. And it's so dominant in our society now that the other thing that's worth considering for those of you parents is don't be worried about teaching your children mindfulness. Become mindful yourself. That's the work, right? That's the work of how to create reconnection and nourish your children and yourself.
Yeah, that's the work. Absolutely. We do have a question in the front row, so we're just passing you a microphone. And hopefully, Michael, you can see our audience in person as well.
I can, yeah.
Great.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
I have a question. Well, I do mindfulness regularly, not every day, but I have found sometimes I feel calm, and then when I sit to meditate, I actually feel more stressed, and I would like to know your comments on that, please.
Okay. Well, that's a great question, and it's a big question. So there's 2 possibilities. There's probably 100 possibilities, but I'll give you 2 broad possibilities. One is that the way you're meditating has got too much effort and strain in it. So there's a term called right effort. or right concentration in mindfulness practice. And I'm going to suggest, I'm just looking for it right now. There's a couple of meditations in our app that are designed specifically for people like yourself. If you're putting too much effort in, if you might want to make a note, one of them is called Developing Acceptance. That's literally its title, Developing Acceptance. Another is Open Awareness. It's just called Open Awareness. So it's quite tricky with meditation, because if you sort of forcing yourself to be present and concentrating, you create tension in the system. And some of you may experience that when I was giving you with those very precise instructions. The next thing you know, you're tense, trying to concentrate, right? And that's a sign that you're overdoing it, right? So the beautiful expression is a guitar string. Is if a guitar string is too loose, it doesn't play well. If it's too tight, it doesn't play well. You want to be kind of that just rightness. So you want to be able to monitor yourself. Is my mind drifting? I'm all over the place, and then I'm not meditating. That's not enough effort, not enough concentration. Or is it tight? Is there a tight, each breath, and there's a tight quality? That's not right effort. There's this, which is hard to do, to train yourself. But over time, you want to train yourself to be able to have the serene, balanced attention and learn. You're training your body and your mind to go, oh, it's possible to be so at ease in myself and present. So there's an ease in the presence. And so that's right effort. The second thing that can be occurring, typical thing that can be occurring, is that you have emotions and challenges that you're not dealing with in your life. And you may have ways to nicely numb them out, like social media or TV or food or chocolate or alcohol or whatever. And then when you meditate, which is like you're resensitizing, you're connecting, and then all those things that you've been ignoring kind of come up. It's like, wow. And it's not, it may not be your case, but for many it is. It's not factually true to say I was calm until I started meditating. A more factually accurate way of saying it is, I was numb, not really noticing the anxiety, etc. I sat down to meditate, and whoa, now I'm feeling all these things that I've been ignoring. That is, if you don't have a broader context of mindfulness, it's like horrible. Why would you want to do that? Give me the glass of wine rather, please. Why do I want to do that? Right? So, there's that Netflix show I want to watch. What's important is taking a long-term view, is that the more you can befriend and sit with and allow difficult emotions without trying to escape them, two magical things happen. One, you develop a very, very strong, mature mind, which is desperately needed in the area of leadership and growth and development. This incredibly balanced, sweet, strong mind, right, inside yourself. And the second thing is you give up on the fantasy that life can only be all sweetness and roses and pleasant. You guys work in the UN, you know that. But and there's this deep settled maturity that comes. I wish I had more time to describe to you, but befriending, sitting with and allowing difficult emotions is probably the most important thing you could ever do for your life and your mental well-being. This will allow you, for example, to not react when you're in emotional pain. It will allow you to empathize with others deeply. It will allow you not to turn away from the pain of others that you just want to turn away from, is to stay present in it. There's so much magic, but gee whiz, when you're sitting there for the 5 minutes in your living room and it's just horrible and you want to turn Netflix on, it doesn't make much sense, which is why we strongly encourage you. On our app, we've got a 10-hour audio series, podcast audio series on what's called the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. I can't strongly recommend it enough. If you're interested in the background matters, understanding context of why you're going to sit there and feel anxiety for 5 minutes. We'd often just say, at the very minimum, accept anxiety, accept sadness. It's a part of life. Trying to run away from it only makes it worse. And you're only going to go numb. And no one wants to be numb. We want to live alive, connected, intimate lives, right? That's what we want. And so part of the deal is intimate, alive with pain too, sadness too. And we begin to discover that these emotions are not a problem. In fact, they're important data and they're beautiful in their own way. So we also say to our clients, are you anxious about being anxious? It's like, well, anxiety is a part of life. allow yourself to breathe with it. Let it be there. It's okay.
I hope that answers your question, Manuela. Thank you, Michael. We've only got a few minutes left. Can we take one more question from our online audience over on Menti? Thank you. Oh, and maybe we'll see if we have time yet. Do we need to meditate to be mindful? Shouldn't mindfulness somehow be a part of everyday life? How do you be mindful more often?
The short answer is, if you want to it depends the degree of fitness you want to get. I'd ask it in gym. It's like, how fit do you want to get? Well, if you want to get really fit, gym's not an option. You have to go to gym. If you want to really develop in mindfulness, meditation's kind of non-optional. Most of us don't like it for the exact reason I've just said, because it takes discipline, and more often than not, the things that you're running away from in your life comes to visit you inside your body and mind. They're there. You've just been running, and processing them is not easy. So that's the invitation. Often when clients say meditation's horrible, it's difficult, and I say, did you sit the 20 minutes or 10 minutes you committed to? Yes. Great. Keep going. It's not supposed to be all sweetness and roses. That's that's the marketing. That's not true. It's not true at all. It can be amazing like that. And yes, it's true that to cultivate mindfulness in your life is the ultimate goal. You want to be seamless in mindfulness. Basically, the goal is to be mindful all the time. But we strongly, because the mind is so inclined to drift and delude and lie and repeat thinking, it's useful to have some kind of anchor activity in your life that kind of consciously breaks the trance. So if it's running, if you exercise, for example, in the morning, run mindfully. Don't let your mind drift. Feel the footsteps. Feel the breath. Be in the run. Be there in the run fully. Don't let the mind drift and think about work and life. All of that's rumination. None of that's good for you. So that's an example. So if you walk from one building to the other in the I don't know how the UN, I've never been there, but a lot of clients have big buildings. When you walk from one building to, don't be rehashing the coming meeting and the meeting you've just been in. Walk mindfully. Feel the footsteps. And there's practices again with an app suggesting. So it's very useful to anchor and consciously practice, and it's important. And again, mindfulness is natural, but it gets eroded by all these unconscious habits and behaviors. So we have to reverse it by deliberately practicing. Your mind and your brain are not your friend as a general rule when it comes to happiness. The mind and the brain is designed to avert fear. It's like what's called a caveman mind, right? To avert fear, not die, and kind of be perpetually anxious. That's what evolution's kind of designed us to be. And your life expectancy, that's okay if your life expectancy is 28 years old, but if you're planning to live longer, it's actually anti-evolutionary. It actually damages your body and mind. And it actually takes away from your life. So it's like, as our medicine and modern world has evolved, we need to evolve the practices of the mind to suit.
I do confirm we have a rather large building and we're off and running, so we can take that on.
Great.
I know it's 1 on the dot, so I'm conscious some people do have to leave. We do have one final question from a person in the audience, so let's get them a mic and let's ask one more question.
Does it work? Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I am an international affairs master student. And as a student, I was wondering about how mindfulness can foster the learning process for those of us who are still learning content. Also because students are very, very exposed to stress. And I think that mindfulness can really be a game-changing factor here, because in order to manage all the deadlines and stressful sources of stress you're exposed to, I think that's a very important.
I have a 24-year-old son studying at Oxford in the UK, and a 23-year-old daughter studying psychology in Australia. So I can witness the stress that goes on with them. So I totally relate. And they both meditate, which is super helpful for them. I mean, just one tip for you, right? So same as everyone else, try and establish a routine. And when your mind says to you, you should be studying, you shouldn't be meditating, just like, shut up, mind. Like right now, I'm going to be present. Because what I've noticed with both my 23 and 24-year-old is there's such a profound insecurity in their student mind that they haven't made it yet, that they're not going to be able to get out in the real world and make it. All this existential anxiety, right, of that stage of life. And I do a lot of empathizing with them, where I let them know this is okay, this is normal, this is part of the process. You know, I'm glad I don't have to live in my 20-year-old mind again. It's tough. And then you just keep on reminding them, establish a practice and remind yourself that this is going to be good for your studying. So you like anchor to convince yourself. Now, there's a ton of research that shows that people who meditate regularly do better on test scores. Just an FYI. It makes sense because it cultivates awareness and steady attention, and it enables you to actually improve your concentration. It's also no accident now that, you know, most sporting teams, most of them are learning to meditate now. And in Australia here, I mean, several of our best sport winning teams meditate. In the basketball arena, everyone's meditating. It's now just a fact of life that it improves performance. Now, I don't teach it for that. I teach it, my intention is to reduce suffering and increase joy, connectedness, and ethics, and consciousness, and compassion. But there is a realm where meditation is taught purely for performance, and it makes a huge difference. So if you need to trick yourself to say, I'm taking 10 minutes to meditate, I'm not being lazy, this is going to improve my test scores. Allow yourself to think that way.
Great question, and I think it's very relevant also to the workplace, not just for students, as you mentioned. I'm afraid we have to go. We could keep talking for much longer. A huge thanks, Michael, for taking your evening to be with us. It's a real joy to have you with us, and we learned so much. Mary, thanks as always for being with us as well. A huge thanks to our audience in person and online. We hope that you learned with us today. After the session, we're going to be sending you the resources. So there is 30 days for free on the app that Michael mentioned that he's been working on for many years now. It's called Awakened Mind. And so the practices he mentions are there if you'd like to try them. So we'll send them to you. We also have resources from the Staff Counselor's Office. Headspace is free for you and staff to use as well, and we'll share the resources for that. There's a resource guide where we'll include the book that Michael has, The Mindful Leader, as well as the executive summary if you don't have much time and you want to read maybe the key points. Michael, is there something you wanted to end with?
I would just love to, I always try and conclude my talks with this really simple remembering, is that when we are psychologically well, when we are psychologically unwell, our unwellness spills onto others. When we are psychologically well, our wellness spills onto others. May you be well.
That's such a great way to end. Thank you so much, Michael and Mary. If you have any questions you still want to ask, please email us at commons@un.org. We'd love your feedback as well, so we can always improve and make sessions relevant to you. So please let us know. We'll share a link and a QR code as we end. Just a quick note, you're welcome to join us. Our next Commons event is on the 16th of June with the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. We're going to be looking at different aspects of disarmament and how, especially as young people, we can build a more secure world. We'll look at gender and disarmament. We'll look at space, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. You can ask the Unity team all your questions, so join us on the 16th of June. I'm afraid we have to go, but take care and bye for now. See you soon.
Thank you, Nat.